For the Council Bluffs Community School District Board of Directors. Mr. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Dr. Ogres?
Present.
Mr. Minshaw?
Here.
Mr. McGlade?
Present.
Ms. Shudak?
Here.
Mr. Arthur?
Here.
Mr. LaFurla?
Here.
Mr. Kazire?
Present. As you're able, would you please rise with me to observe a moment of silence? Please join with me the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have now before us the approval of our agenda. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving tonight's agenda signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. And the motion to approve our agenda has passed. Before us now is the approval of the minutes for the work session and the workshop of December 10th. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I can move approval of the minutes from the work session and workshop / business meetings of December 10th, 2019.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes from the previous board meeting signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. And the motion to approve our minutes has passed. For us now is public participation. This is a time for our public to address the board concerning board agenda items or any items of concern. If anyone wishes to address the board, please make your way to the podium. And we have no one moving, so we will move next to our superintendent's report / student achievement.
Well, thank you. If I might, before we begin our achievement report, Dr. Vorthman can go ahead and make his way to the podium, who will be presenting on the post-secondary enrollment. I wanted to take a moment to talk about today the condition of the state address by our governor. We were very honored to have our governor reach out to our district and celebrate the work that we've been doing with TradeWorks. And today, she honored our district in her speech and had our students from TradeWorks, we took some students with us to the Capitol, stand up and talked about the work and the partnership that we have with Iowa Western and our business community, and we couldn't be prouder. Mr. LaFurla was with us representing the board. If you have anything you'd like to add.
Well, it was just a really neat experience, I think, for the students and all of us that were there. She spoke for about, 40 minutes or so, and a good minute 45 just on TradeWorks Academy. I thought that was really neat. There weren't many individuals or groups there that she, sort of called out in her speech. I think we were one of 5 or 6. So it was a really neat thing, and I think we should recognize the students for taking that time out of their day to be there. One of the students' parents were there. I think it was a pretty, they were pretty proud, I think, of their student. And we should probably also recognize our local representatives who took time out after the address to spend some time with the students and show them around the chamber. And I could tell that they were kind of excited that we were there too. So that was it was a really neat experience.
And I also want to thank Dr. Vorthman and Paul Hans, who's not here, who has really championed this work for us, and really, and Dr. Rossick for his donation, and just couldn't be without the work of having everyone here. And the foundation is a great partnership that helped us secure the funds of over $2.2 million. So thank you, Mr. LaFurla, for your work with the foundation. And our representatives were really excited to have us. And they took our students back to the desk and showed them, how they, hit buttons to get involved and request to speak, and our kids were playing with computers, and it was just great. So we have lots of pictures to tweet out. We just haven't gotten that far because we got back late today. So thank you for that, for
Sure.
allowing us that time.
Yes.
At this time, Dr. Borthman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Murillo. It's my pleasure tonight to share with you some information about the post-secondary enrollment data for the class of 2019. And before we begin tonight, I just want to set the stage a little bit that this data that I'm going to share with you tonight comes from the National Student Clearinghouse. The National Student Clearinghouse is a national organization that collects data from about 96% of all post-secondary institutions across the United States. What they do not basically have in there are for-profit post-secondary institutions. So they have really broad coverage, and their data set includes well over half of all graduating high school students in the nation every year. So it's a good snapshot. It gives us an idea of how our students are doing when they graduate from high school, and if they attend a post-secondary institution, how they do there, what their graduation rate is, what their persistence rate is. The other thing I would have mentioned tonight is post-secondary enrollment is what happens post-high school. So what we have found in the past several years as we've reviewed this data is there are a lot of things that happen from May until August. And while we often, when we're working with students, we may have one set of goals in May, life sometimes happens in August or September. And what we've seen over the really the past 6 or 7 years that we've been looking at this data is we have a fairly large number of students, about between 6 and 7% every year, who may not matriculate right after their senior year, but end up coming their second semester of their freshman year, or maybe even a year or 2 years after they graduate. And there are a lot of good reasons for that. Maybe they have some life circumstances, or maybe there are financial needs or financial difficulties. So I just want to set that stage for you tonight as you look at this data. There are some celebrations. There are some areas that we can continue to grow, but it does help us generate some action items on what we can focus on and what we should be celebrating as we work toward a few really important goals that we've set as a school district. So I would call us back to the academic plan that was presented at the end of 2017. And Academic Plan Goal 6 really focused around making post-secondary education inescapable for all students. And we set some pretty audacious goals. The first one on the left side being that by 2020, we would have 60% of our students enrolling in some type of post-secondary education. And secondly, that by 2020, we would increase our degree completion rate to 30% for the class of 2014. And that's the percentage of students who earn a degree within 6 years. So I want to provide kind of an update on where we're at with that tonight for the class of 2018, our class of 2019, our most recent graduating class. So the line graph that you're seeing tonight on the screen is the initial fall enrollment rate of our seniors from the class of 2019. And the top blue line represents all students from the class of 2019. There were 505 students. One of the things that I noticed in the data is that the class of 2019 was the smallest graduating class that we've had since 2014, which had 500 students. As you know, with law of averages, the smaller the n gets, the more a single student makes a difference in that number. So while the number of students that we have is about 50%, it's a mighty number, and 1 or 2 students the other way would have put us right back to where we were last year. You'll also notice a trend that we've recognized over this past several years, and that's the growing interest among students and families in two-year schools. And that's not only a trend in Council Bluffs, it's a trend in the state of Iowa and a trend across the nation. And much of that, the literature attributes to simply affordability of students wanting to take advantage of opportunities, maybe to get some general credits or earn an associate's degree close to home before transferring to a four-year school. And in fact, our two-year enrollment is at the highest level ever since we've started tracking this data at 34%. So it's a very, very large number. So we
And
fell a little
do
bit
you-
short. We're supposed to be, oh,
Do you
sorry, Joe.
think the percentage of that is increased because of the Iowa Western enrollment that we've had, or, I don't want to
Talk
burst your
about Iowa
bubble,
Western
but
enrollment here in a minute, but yes, I think that has a lot to do with it. I also think that Potawatomi Promise
Yeah.
contributes significantly to that, because we provided a pathway for students to that. I also think that our focus on concurrent enrollment, the works that we've done with early college, the exposure that we have with the CAP program, and TradeWorks at Iowa Western have really bolstered students to see that a two-year degree is something that is attainable and is worthy of attaining.
and significantly less cost.
Significantly less cost, yeah. So we still have some work to do. I still think that we have a good shot of getting to our 60%. It may be in that year one or year two after graduation number, but I still think that we are on track to do that. And as I looked at the trend across the last 8 years, we are still on an upward trajectory as a school district when you look back 8 years where we started at about 45%. So as Dr. Agras mentioned, our most frequent institutions of enrollment for the class of 2019, as no surprise to you, is Iowa Western Community College. Fully 2/3 of all seniors who pursued post-secondary education enrolled at Iowa Western this fall. That more than consumes all of the other institutions that students attend. You'll notice that the very top there are 1% or institutions that had less than 1% of our enrollment. There were 23 of them. They make up about 16% of the whole. So there's a whole bunch of institutions where only 1 or 2 students are going. But then you can see the second most frequent is Iowa State University and the University of Iowa at 4%. You'll most noticeably the after Iowa Western are most of our four-year institutions where students are pursuing a four-year degree. What's interesting about this number for the class of 2019 is it represents a record enrollment at Iowa Western Community College for fall enrollment. We typically have been sending about 50% of students in post-secondary to Iowa Western. Now we are at 2/3 at Iowa Western, and that represents an all-time high over the past 6 years at Iowa Western. So I think that the work that we're doing in partnership with them, building more articulation agreements, making sure that our pathways are cohesive and with their pathways, is well serving our students as they're choosing to enroll at Iowa Western after their Council Bluffs education. The next data point that I wanted to share with you tonight is the post-secondary persistence rate. And this is the percentage of students who go for a freshman year and then come back in their sophomore year. And our persistence rate has really maintained about a pretty consistent rate over the past 5 years. We've kind of been in that 70-71% range. Some people will look at that and say, gosh, that's kind of a low number. Especially if you look at nationally and two-year schools, our persistence rate in two-year schools is remarkable. And it is growing, as you can see. We really took a nice bump in 2016 and came back a little bit this year, but have pretty well maintained that. Around 60% of kids who are going for their freshman year coming back for their second year. That number is higher, as you notice there, for four-year schools as well. And the last number is kind of the what I would call the lagging indicator, the one that we do a lot of stuff up front, but have to wait a long time to see if it pays off, and that is the percentage of students who complete a degree within 6 years of graduation. And it takes us a long time to get those students through the system to see if what we were doing works. And the good news is we are starting to see the pendulum uptick and start to make some increases. And this is the one that I get the most excited about because it's the one where I think we can see the biggest payoff, and that is continuing to get us closer and closer to more students getting that degree or certificate or credential. The other reason I'm the most excited about it is the one I think we can move the fastest with the programming that we've created with Early College Academy, with the TradeWorks programs, with CAP, with the College Credit Acceleration Program. All of those are going to move this needle. It's just going to take us some time to see the results. For example, for the class of 2019, we already know that there are 9 students who already have graduated. And so as a percentage, that's already showing on the radar. And when I look back through the previous cohorts, 1 year after graduation, there was 0. So we know that that needle is moving. It's just going to take us a little bit to see the momentum behind those types of programs.
And that should start to escalate as well, just because of the CE and
Yes.
the other classes. So,
Yep.
they're getting that done, that year done or 6 months done, so.
And we'll bring you a version of this data again at the end of the school year, so you can see exactly how many students were able to complete that second credential in all of those different programs for the class of 2020 as well. So I still think that we are on track to try to crack that 30% for the class of 2014. We have a big hill to climb for the class of 2014, but we still have enough, there are enough kids enrolled and still in college to hit that 30% for the class of 2014 right now within 6 years. So fingers are crossed that students are hanging in there even when it gets tough in the class of 2014. So with that, I would welcome any questions that you might have around our post-secondary enrollment for the class of 2019.
Questions from the board?
So with just all of our different programs that we offer, does that get captured by the clearinghouse, or is that something that they don't see? Oh, they do.
They do capture it,
Oh, okay.
yeah. Yeah, what they don't capture is any students who get the credential while they are in high school. The clearinghouse will only pick them up once they have a graduation date, but we are tracking all of that data internally so we can add it into the clearinghouse data for those classes after 2019.
But they're included in the enrollment numbers?
Correct. They're
They're
included in the
counted
enrollment
as a
numbers,
2-year enrolled
Correct.
student.
if they decided to go on.
Only if they decided to
That
go
is
on.
correct.
So if they graduated in spring with their welding certificate and decided not to enroll, they would not be reflected in the enrollment, but
That
they
is
would in
correct.
the graduation rate.
That is correct. And so what I did is I went back through the entire data set and isolated every one of our ECA graduates to see if they enrolled or didn't enroll. And the 3 welding certificate students did not enroll. All of the rest of the students did.
So we need to consider that when we are looking at enrollment in the first year after high school as being a significant factor. Because if you had, 30 or 40 students graduate with a diploma or certificate or a degree that led to a job immediately, wouldn't necessarily be as important.
Yeah, it's a new data point for us to start
Yeah.
tracking on that completion of certificates and diplomas and associate's degree while students are still in high school.
Great, because they might go on to, electrical school, which
Yep.
is in a post, but they're continuing their education in another format that's not being captured there to get their licenses. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Borthman. At this time, I'd like to invite Mr. Hamilton to the podium. He's going to present an informational presentation on our trauma-informed district training update. I'm looking forward to the board hearing the update on, it's a lot of work that the district's been doing, and really excited. And I'm not going to steal any of his thunder, so I'm going to stop there. Mr. Hamilton, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you for having me. I could talk all night about this. I promise I won't. I know several of you have things to do. I promised a certain principal that I I make promises to more often than some others that I would say this before I start. If you haven't eaten dinner, anybody watching at home or here, Freddy's is having a Lewis and Clark night, so go ahead and stop by and tell them you're there for Lewis and Clark. So
Is it tonight?
you can all say that I did that.
Tonight, Mr.
It is
Howell?
tonight.
Okay.
So if you smell onions, that might be me. So thanks for having me. I am excited to talk about this. We have put a lot of effort into our trainings this year. You know, as I came around last year and started talking about this, something that we started and we thought we could do this, and then when you start looking at the numbers, and over winter break I really dug into the numbers and looked at it, and I was even a little shocked myself. So before we get going too far, I just want to say I put some things in your packet that really have a lot more information than I'll share with you tonight, just so you have even more information, because I think it's important to know what all the schools are going through. This is a 2-year training that we put in, but it will be ongoing because it is online. We have that opportunity. So we are using the Trauma Informed Online Academy. That academy, there's 5 tracks right now. This is a relatively new product. So, for example, when I say that, because the school support track is something that last year they didn't have. So this year, that's something that they created. So it's something that we didn't even know when we purchased this that we would have access to it. We haven't used it yet, but it's something that moving forward that we'll be able to have access to. So when we look at it, they have a basic track, an advanced track, an administrator's track, and a parent track. The basic track and advanced track I'll go over here in a little bit. The administrator's track is really what we're using for our lead teams in each building to kind of curve and tell us as leaders how are we going to use this program within our buildings. And then the parent track is something that next year we hope to break out to let parents use a little more, but we want to train our building staff first to, before we use it. Edison has a couple parents because they piloted this program. They have a couple parents who are using it, and they're reporting back and saying how they're liking it for us. So let's get into talk about what the basic track is. Again, this is what we're doing for the 2019-20 school year. It has 5 areas that we're focusing on this school year. ACEs in trauma awareness. ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. So what we're really looking at is how do our experiences as children and how does trauma affect our daily lives? So things that we go through, how does that affect us as we're in school and out of school? Dysregulation, so this is changing our thought process. How do we come in, and if we're dysregulated, so that means if we're not able to emotionally be ready for school, and this is not just kids, but as teachers, if we're dysregulated, what do we need to do to become regulated? Because if we are dysregulated anyway, we're not able to teach and we're not able to learn. The next area is respond, don't react. So again, this is focusing as teachers. If a student has a behavior, rather than reacting to that behavior, we're responding to it. So I might say to you, and I know I've said this to you guys before, rather than saying, what's wrong with you, my question would be, what can I do to help you? The next area is Just Breathe, practical self-regulation strategies. Again, these are strategies for both our kids and our teachers. So we want people to be able to self-regulate. So I want to be able to recognize my triggers. Students have triggers, adults have triggers. I want to be able to recognize what my triggers are that might cause me to become dysregulated, and then figure out what I need to be able to do to become regulated so I can be in a classroom and be successful. A lot of this is focusing on mindfulness. And then the last area is scenarios. So within these 5 areas, there's lessons within all of these areas that might be journaling, watching videos, some discussion boards. So there's anywhere between 14 and 24 lessons within these 5 areas. And the basic track is about 13 hours of work that we're asking our teachers and staff to go through this school year. Next school year, we'll be focusing on the advanced track. This is about 10 hours of learning. The first course is on restorative justice, responsibility, healing, and hope. And what this is really having students take responsibility for their behaviors. And then once they have behaviors, what do they need to do to fix the behaviors that they've had in class? So how do they accept the responsibility for their behaviors? And what do they do to make it right amongst their classmates, their teachers, whoever it is that behavior affected within their classroom? Circling up for conflict resolution. This is teaching teachers. Many of us, when we went to college, we learned how to teach reading. We learned how to teach math. We didn't have a class on how to teach conflict resolution. So this is teaching teachers how to do conflict resolution. So when kids are having issues with each other, how can we come in as teachers or staff members and have conflict resolution with them? So we can have healing with them. And again, I can come in as a staff member and say, two people need to get along. It works much better if the two people can work it out together. Transforming your environment is really focusing on how do we set classrooms up or schools up to be successful. Communicating and connecting is your tone, your body language. How do you connect with parents? How do you connect with kids? And then the last piece under the advanced track is understanding violent behavior. So we've given teachers all these tools. The last piece is kids have violent behavior. Kids who have these experiences, who have trauma, sometimes they have no other outlet but to have violent behavior. So how do we deal with these kids who have these violent behaviors? So this is what I'm really most excited about. Talk about how many staff members, and I say in quotation marks staff members, because the cool part about this being online is when I say staff members, it's not just our staff members. We have the ability to say there's 969 people who are doing this work right now within our district. That includes some AA people. We have therapists who come in and work with our staff. The therapists, I have schools who will say, hey, I have a therapist that comes and works with our students. Could they have access to this training? We can give people access to training who aren't our staff members so they can go through the training with us. So we have several different people, community partners, who are also going through this training with us. Every building is represented in this. And probably the thing that I'm most excited about is every month I lead our Educational Service Center people. So people from Dean's Department, people that you would not think, not just deans, but everybody up here is going through the training. So, and when we do that, because when you think about trauma training, it's not just dealing with students. You all, if you wanted to go through the trainings, you all could have access as well. Even our everyday lives of working in our workplaces, just this really focuses on, especially this first year, building relationships. How do we get along with other people? So everybody here at ESC is going through the training as well. And I think it really has been received very well because people say, oh, I've worked with somebody who has acted like this, and I've always wondered, how do I work with this? Or we get phone calls with people who call and are dysregulated, and how do I work with somebody who's dysregulated? So it's really been beneficial, I feel. So those are the people who we work with every single day who have the time to do this. But there's also a lot of staff members who maybe don't have access to computers, who aren't here all the time. So we've offered some other professional development, but we don't necessarily have 13 hours to spend with them, and I wish we did. So myself and Meg Amundsen, who was going to be here tonight, but she had some sick kids, so I said, please go be with your kids. We've worked with nutrition staff. They offered us to come. 21st century staff, kids and company, I think the leaders of every building, and then first student, and we're also, so that's the bus drivers, we're meeting with first student again later this month. And I included the PowerPoint. It's called the 5 Critical Steps to Trauma Responsive Schools. That picture up there, that's myself on your left, and Jim Sporleader. Jim Sporleader is really a leader in the country when you talk about trauma in schools. He came to us during Summer Academy. He was a keynote speaker, and he was gracious enough to give us a PowerPoint, and he said, use my PowerPoint. You don't even need to recreate this. Use my PowerPoint. He said, this is what I do if I have an hour to go and talk to schools. So we've been using his PowerPoint, and like I said, I shared it with you, and it's the 5 critical steps to trauma-responsive schools. And it really talks about, again, follows exactly what our trainings are about how you can't, a dysregulated student, you need to let them become regulated before you can work with them. All the things that we're focused on. We've done it with that staff, and it's been amazing because nutrition staff will come and say, nobody's really talked to us about this. Bus drivers have done the same thing. And in my mind, bus drivers are the first adult those kids are seeing sometimes in the morning. Nutrition staff, those kids are coming in every morning and eating breakfast, every day at lunch. And I say, you have an opportunity to make a kid's day. You're another caring adult. So we've been very lucky to be able to work with those people, and hopefully they invite us back, and we'll continue to do it. So looking ahead for the remainder of this year, we'll continue to support and monitor our schools. I have access to be able to go in and look at every single school, every single teacher, to see how far everybody's getting. When they do an assignment, like I said, there's between 14 and 25 in each group or in each lesson. So I can go in and look at every single teacher to see how they're doing. The schools also have that access to be able to, the lead team in each school. So we'll continue to support and monitor our schools. Summer Academy, I'm really excited for the restorative justice piece and the conflict resolution piece because I think that's something that our schools could really use. So we're doing some extra trainings. We're training some internal people so they can do that at Summer Academy. The parent track, like I said, we have a few parents who are already piloting that for us, but I want to open it up to more parents. And then there's a community piece that Lemonade for Life. I don't know if any of you have heard of that before, but I would encourage you to Google it. It's something in our community that we've been asked to join, and we have. People from the YMCA, the hospitals, many of the social services here within the community have gone through this 2-day training already. And it really is focused on trauma and how we as a community members can help our own community and the people out there through trauma, and how we all should be focused on that more. So I would encourage you to just Google and learn a little more about it. It's brand new, so I'm learning more about it as we go, but most of my staff is involved with that as well. So at this time, I would welcome any questions.
Questions from the board?
Yeah, I guess I had a question. We're kind of talking about just how to engage community more in this, you know, so that they could see us as ability to get this broader discussion out. And maybe it'd be, kind of which would be the appropriate way, or which tool, you know, would be the best way to roll out something across the community that they could engage in. Maybe that is that Lemonade for Life or something else. Yeah.
We've also talked, I know Dr. Murillo and I have talked about how do we share this with our parents to let them know what we're doing. And I think it was more important, we said we wanted to first share this with the board to let you guys know kind of what we've been doing first. And I think some of the things that I shared with you would be important to share with our parents to just let them know the training that we're going down. But the people that we're using or that we get our product from have been great with providing us information that we can share with parents. So I think that is something we need to do more of.
I think that's important, and I also think that it's important to be reciprocal and having an idea of what you need from parents to support you through the process. And when you do your town hall talk, and that being your fourth speaking point, it might be a good idea to project what you need from the community or from those that attend the community hall meeting to support you in addressing that. You're telling them what you're doing, but they may have ideas of what they want to do to support you additionally. So perhaps creating of, not a list of things that you need, but what can they do to support you throughout this process would be my recommendation. And frequently in faculty meetings, we, mostly our leadership meetings in the last few months, our department chair goes around the Zoom room and asks all of us virtually to introduce themselves again and talk about how things are going in their life, and if there's anything that may be contributing in their life personally that could affect their performance in the meeting today. And we've had a lot of good interpersonal discussion amongst faculty members to make it more of a group community and working through that. So I appreciated you sharing that because it was familiar to me when we do it in our meetings. I would love to have access to the training modules.
Absolutely.
So I deal with it in healthcare, and we see sometimes hostile patients, and it's a challenge. So I would appreciate the access.
What I'll do is, so people we don't put anybody on the spot. What I'll do is I'll get everybody access to it and share your passwords and your login. It's really simple. I'll get that for all of you, and you can log in and take a look at it.
Well, this is strong work, and it's important work, and I appreciate all of your efforts, and you seem very invested in it, and that's key to being successful.
I have kids in this district, so it's important.
I appreciate, in our discussion earlier, and Dr. Millen brought up kind of how early adopters are coaching kind of the rest of the class now on kind of the next steps, as they've learned kind of the basic tracks of it, and that they all run through that empathy. I think a lot of parents saw our trauma-informed care and saw just the empathy piece, and were kind of a little confused by that. So I think sharing things with the public is good anyway, because they also want to see then, hey, when does that turn around to that child growing beyond that, or at least having the other students feel that there is some a backlash, but there's consequences, and you have to be accountable, even though you have, you've come from, you may have had a traumatic day at the very start in the history of that, but that you need to be accountable for your own ability to regulate yourself too.
Yeah.
So it's just really good to see that conversation is evolving within the district. So
I would say that I don't necessarily like the word consequences, but expectations. We have high expectations for all of our kids, no matter where you're coming from. We have high expectations, and then the accountability pieces certainly should be there for all of our kids.
I think it plays well into the ability to look more at the learning environment, the rigor, and other things that we want, to just continue to grow and evolve, because we're starting our kids from a place where they are in the best place to be a good learner.
Absolutely. And again, I'm running out of time, but
You
it's
have
for our
plenty of
teachers.
time.
It's-
There's no time limit here.
But it's for our teachers too. Our teachers have a tough job, and we heard Jamie Vollmer a few weeks ago talk, and the things that are put on them to do. They have a tough job, and to be able to give them some skills and things that they could learn and do so they can stay regulated, and just some of the mindfulness practices and anything that we could do to help with that, I think is very powerful, and so any tools that we can give them, I think it's a tough job. So.
I think that's what I learned tonight, compared to previous conversations that we've had about trauma-informed. I realized that's really about, this is for all of us. It's not just something we're doing to kids or expecting of kids, or a tool that we're putting in the teacher's toolbox for kids. It's for all of us. It's for the staff to learn, how they can better take care of their own emotional wellness. And I think once we've incorporated the parents in all of this, we've covered as many facets, I think, as we can as schools, in terms of, the adults that are around that child's 24 hours a day. And all of us as, you know, regulated adults will do a much better job of teaching and helping regulated children learn.
I'll leave with this. It was great the other day to, not my wife, but some other lady that was at my house, to hear my 13-year-old son say, lady in my house, I think you may be dysregulated and may need to take a minute. So we all need it sometimes, and even our own kids can recognize it, and that's what we need for all of us, is to just be able to say, I need a minute, and I'm gonna come back and be better. So, yeah.
I have a sticky note on my computer because I frequently am online, and it says, what does my physical presence look like? And some days are scarier than others. But it's a constant reminder to me to be aware.
I appreciate that you have taken the resources available to you for those employees that you don't have the 13 hours to pare that down. I'm assuming then that we're also extending that to like janitorial staff. I appreciate that it's the aftercare, you know, before and after, the bus drivers, those that have that maybe firsthand contact or last-hand contact. And just kind of looking at all those aspects, coaches, things of that nature that might have those small interactions with them.
Always working to get in there, again, we're meeting with bus drivers again, because there's a constant changing of staff, and so always trying, whenever I see them, hey, can I come in, meet with them, and time is important to everybody, so if I'm willing to do it, and Meg is willing to do it, so always, it's important. I think it's really important, so,
Thank you.
thank you all.
That completes our report.
Okay. Next up, we have the resolution portion of our meeting. Do we have a resolution regarding the Shared Vision grant application?
I'll move to approve the submission of a grant application for continued Shared Visions funding to support preschool programming at Roosevelt Elementary and Rue Elementary.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yeah, I guess I just want to know more. a little bit.
Sure.
Okay. Dr. Worthman? This is a renewal of a grant that we currently have. And he can kind of share a little bit about the work that Dr. Matthews.
So every 5 years, Shared Visions is a grant that originates through the state of Iowa. It is competitive, becoming more competitive since statewide voluntary preschool came into effect, because of many school districts like ours are using braided funding. So they're able to couple the half-day funding for statewide voluntary preschool with the Shared Visions grant. It only funds schools that have a large percentage of students who are in poverty. So we pick 2 schools. There's a maximum amount that we can request for the grant, and for us, it funds 2 schools. They used to have a separate set of standards that they had to follow. That's become less of an issue now. They don't use NACCE accreditation anymore. They now use the Iowa Quality Preschool Standards, so that helps us streamline some of our processes. But without this grant, we cannot continue to fund all of our preschool programs. So Dr. Matthews has been working on the renewal of this grant, and it has become much, much more competitive over the past 5 years. Roughly $2.5 million.
So I noticed on the assurance PDF that was loaded up that just the Rue Elementary preschool document was in there. So the Roosevelt will.
We also have one for Roosevelt.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
that was
so this was
they're
just,
exactly
this
the
is,
same.
okay.
Yeah, wanted you to see what
Just
the-
different dollar values for
Yep.
the programs.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Wanted to make sure, Dr. Matthews wanted to make sure you understood what you were signing on to with the
Sure.
assurances that we'll sign for both the schools, should the board accept the grant. So. Thank you.
Hearing no further discussion, before us now is a resolution to approve the grant application for the Shared Visions. Mr. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
And I have open online voting. Mr. LaFurla,
Yes.
Dr. Ogres, Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Ms. Shudek,
Yes.
Mr. Arthur.
Yes.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes, and the motion to approve the grant application has been approved. Before us now is a resolution regarding allowable growth. Do we have a motion?
$164,900 of modified allowable growth for dropout prevention.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Is this about roughly the same each year, or?
It's roughly about the same each year. This is about a little less than $100,000 more than it was last year.
I guess the only thing I see is that the last three digits are transposed from what the recommended action is and what the public content is.
Oh, great.
So that's the only difference. But our resolution was for 913
Great of mine.
as
I do see that now, yes.
Which one is it?
It's the one.
the
up-
913, the top. Hearing no further discussion, before us now is a resolution to request allowable growth for dropout prevention to the SBRC. Mr. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Dr. Ogres? Mr. Arthur?
Yes.
Ms. Shudek?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes, and the resolution has been approved. Before we adjourn, our work session this evening was the conclusion of our Leadership for Student Learning, and the last module that we talked about was continuation and staying the course. We had very good discussion, and we talked about what our next steps will be, and we're looking forward to continuing on our board education, and that will be determined in the next couple of weeks. So with that, thank you for your diligent work tonight. I appreciate it. We are adjourned.